I never expected her to remember my name, let alone everything else. The first time I met her, my boss's wife, it was in the cramped coffee shop across from the office. I had gone in for my usual black drip, the kind of drink you order when you don't want to reveal much about yourself. She was already there, leaning against the counter while the barista fumbled with her order. "You're Ryan, right?" she asked, glancing at me the way people glance at a street they've already walked down. Not curious, just familiar. "Yeah," I said, a little too quickly. "You've got a good memory." She smiled at that. "You order the same thing every time. Hard to forget." I didn't think much of it then, but that one sentence stuck. People don't usually notice me like that. Not in the office, not in my apartment where the walls keep too quiet, not even in the group chats that stay unread. That morning was ordinary. Paperwork piled on my desk, my boss had already left town on a business trip, and I was half thinking of skipping lunch to save a little cash. But she was at the shop again, in the same gray coat, tapping her fingers on the counter while waiting for her cappuccino. When she noticed me in line behind her, she tilted her head. "Black coffee, right?" I nodded, though something about the way she said it made me want to change my order. "You should try it with cream sometime," she added, not quite teasing, not quite serious. I managed a small laugh. Maybe I liked the bitterness. She gave me a look that lingered longer than it needed to. I couldn't tell if she was measuring me or just being polite. We ended up sitting near each other, 2 tables apart, which somehow felt closer than it should have. I scrolled through my phone without reading anything, typed out a message I never sent, then deleted it. She was doing something similar, staring at her screen but not really there. Every few minutes, I caught myself glancing at her hands. The way she held her cup with both palms wrapped around it, like she needed the warmth. The way her thumb tapped against the porcelain absent-mindedly. I noticed everything I wasn't supposed to notice. At one point, she looked up. Our eyes met, and neither of us looked away fast enough. She smiled, the kind of smile that wasn't practiced. More like she was amused at catching me in the act. I folded my napkin into smaller and smaller squares just to keep my hands busy. She tilted her head, like she was about to say something, but then her phone buzzed on the table. She read the screen, her lips tightening for just a second, then slipping back into that neutral calm. She stood, gathering her bag. "Enjoy your coffee," she said softly, like it was meant only for me. I wanted to say something back, something clever, something that would make her pause, but all that came out was, "You too." She left, the bell above the door jangling in her wake. I sat there a while longer, finishing coffee I didn't even want anymore. When I finally pulled out my phone to check the time, I saw a message waiting. A number I didn't recognize. "He's out of town." "I'm not." I didn't reply to that text right away. I stared at it so long the screen dimmed, and even then, the words hung there, burned into my mind. "He's out of town." "I'm not." When I finally saw her again, it wasn't in the coffee shop. It was in the office, late afternoon, when the floor was nearly empty and the light came in at that strange golden angle that makes everything feel softer than it should. She was sitting at my boss's desk, flipping through a stack of papers with the kind of ease that suggested this wasn't new for her. "You work too late," she said without looking up. I could say the same. Her lips curved, but her eyes stayed on the papers. "I don't actually work here." That should have been the end of it. Just a polite exchange. Instead, I lingered, holding a mug of tea I didn't even want. She glanced up, then motioned toward the chair across from her. "Sit. You look like you need a break." I sat. For a while, we didn't talk. She shuffled papers, I sipped tea that tasted faintly metallic. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, though, it stretched, then settled. Eventually, she set the papers aside. "You know," she said, almost offhandedly, "when I was your age, I thought by 40 I'd have everything figured out. House, family, certainty. All of it. Turns out, you just carry different kinds of questions. I didn't know how to respond, so I nodded, tracing my finger along the rim of my mug. You're what? 23, she asked. 24. Her eyes held mine a little too long. Still young. She said it like a fact, not a judgment. Still, the words landed heavy. I wanted to ask why she texted me. I wanted to ask what she meant. Instead, I said, sometimes I feel like I'm already behind. Like everyone else is moving faster. She smiled faintly, almost sadly. That feeling never really goes away. Her hand brushed against mine when she reached for her tea. It wasn't deliberate, I told myself that, but neither of us pulled back right away. I imagined 100 things in that pause, leaning forward, the warmth of her skin lingering against mine, her looking at me the way she had in the coffee shop. And then, just as quickly, I imagined the fallout. My boss finding out. The imbalance of it all. Her age, my age. The way people would talk. She withdrew her hand first, wrapping it tightly around her cup. Careful with thoughts like that, she said, though her voice was quieter than before. I nodded, pretending to understand more than I did. We talked about nothing after that, traffic, a new cafe opening nearby, her mentioning how her son used to work late into the night like I did. But even in the mundane, the air between us shifted. When I finally stood to leave, she reached out and adjusted the sleeve of my jacket, brushing a bit of lint from the shoulder. Such a small gesture. Too small. Yet it stayed with me the whole walk home. I don't know why that moment stayed with me, maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. The next time I saw her, it wasn't planned. It was raining, one of those heavy, soaking rains that makes you regret leaving the house at all. I ducked under the awning of the corner store, shaking water from my sleeves, when I saw her inside, standing by the register with a carton of milk in her hands. She spotted me before I could decide whether to wave or pretend I hadn't noticed. She gave a small smile, barely there, but enough to undo me. You'll catch a cold like that, she said when I stepped in, dripping all over the linoleum. Guess I wasn't prepared, I muttered. Clearly. Her eyes flicked over me, from my wet hair to my soaked shoes. Then, softer, do you want a ride? I said yes before thinking. The drive was quiet. The rain hammered against the windshield, and the wipers squeaked in rhythm. I kept sneaking glances, at her hands gripping the wheel, at the faint line between her brows, at how calm she seemed compared to the storm outside. You live close by, right? She asked. 2 blocks over. She nodded, eyes on the road. For a moment, I thought she might say something more, but the silence held. When we pulled up outside my building, I hesitated. I should have just thanked her and left. Instead, I said, do you want to come up? Just to dry off before driving again. Her hands stilled on the wheel. A beat too long. Then, that's not a good idea. I nodded quickly, feeling heat rise in my face. Right. Sorry. I didn't mean, but then she cut me off with a quiet, almost tired laugh. You don't have to apologize for being kind. The air shifted. Something pressed between us, unspoken but thick enough to feel. She turned toward me, and for the first time, I noticed how close we actually were in the small car. Her perfume, something faint of floral, mixed with the scent of rain and leather seats. I opened my mouth, but before I could say anything, headlights flared in the rearview mirror. Another car pulled up behind us. My neighbor, stepping out with a bag of groceries, glanced our way, then did a double take. She straightened immediately, fingers tightening on the steering wheel. You should go, she said, voice low but firm. I did. I climbed out, muttering thanks I barely heard myself say. She didn't look at me as I shut the door. But just as I was about to run up the steps, I heard her window roll down. Ryan. I turned. Her eyes met mine through the rain. She didn't smile. Didn't move. Just looked at me for a heartbeat too long, like she was on the edge of saying something she couldn't. Then the window slid back up, and the car pulled away. That look stayed with me. That almost confession. That almost everything. Nearing the climax, maximum tension. It was late. Too late to still be at the office, but I'd stayed behind, pretending the spreadsheet in front of me mattered. Really, I was waiting. Hoping. She appeared in the doorway like she always did, quiet, unannounced. Carrying a thermos this time. "You'll ruin your eyes staring at that screen," she said softly. I leaned back in my chair, rubbed at my temples. "Already ruined, I think." She crossed the room and set the thermos down. "Tea. Thought you could use it." I mumbled thanks, though my throat tightened around the word. We sat across from each other, both pretending to sip, both pretending not to notice the silence stretching between us. The hum of the office lights was the only sound. "Finally," she said, "you're too young to be this tired." I gave a dry laugh. "And you're too," I caught myself, stopped. "Too what?" she asked, her eyes catching mine, sharp but not unkind. I looked away, stared at the steam rising from the cup. "Too, here. Too willing to sit with me like this." Her lips parted, then closed again. She shifted in her seat, folding her hands tightly in her lap. "Ryan," she said after a long pause, whatever this is, it can't be." The words landed heavy, but her voice trembled in a way that betrayed her. I should have agreed. I should have let her leave. Instead, I asked quietly, "Then why do you keep showing up?" She blinked, caught. No answer came right away. Her eyes flicked to my hands, were restless, fidgeting with the lid of the thermos, then back to my face. "Because," she stopped. Exhaled. Tried again. "Because you look at me like I'm not invisible." That broke something open in me. "You're not invisible," I said quickly, almost desperate. "You couldn't be. Not to me." Silence. The kind that feels alive, pressing against your ribs. She leaned back, closing her eyes for a moment, as if steadying herself. "You don't understand. I have a life. A husband. People who think they know me. And if anyone," her voice cracked, then steadied. "If anyone saw us like this, even now," her hand brushed her hair back, but I caught the tremor in it. The guilt. The fear. The longing buried underneath. I leaned forward without thinking. Close enough to see the faint lines at the corners of her eyes, the way her lashes trembled when she blinked. Close enough to want more. "Then tell me to stop," I whispered. Her eyes opened, met mine. Wide. Unflinching. She didn't say it. Instead, her hand hovered over mine for a moment, hesitating, almost touching, before pulling back like the space itself burned. We sat there, caught between what we wanted and what we couldn't have. And then she asked, barely audible, "Do you even know what you're doing?" The twist, raising the stakes again the next week, felt like a shift I couldn't name. She stopped appearing in the office late. No more thermos, no quiet doorway visits. At first, I told myself it was coincidence, that she was busy, that our timing was off. But by the third night, sitting alone under the humming lights, I realized she was avoiding me. The silence grew sharper. I sent half a dozen texts I never sent. Little things. "Long day?" / "Are you okay?" / "I'll be around if you need." Each one hovered on the screen before I erased it, as if even my phone could betray me. When I did see her again, it was at the coffee shop where it all began. She was already there, standing by the counter. She didn't look at me right away. Only when the barista handed her a cappuccino did her eyes lift, catching mine. "Ryan," she said. No smile this time. "Hey," I managed, suddenly aware of how tired I sounded. We sat at different tables, her near the window, me a few seats back. For a few minutes, I thought she might invite me over. But she didn't. Instead, she pulled out her phone and typed, thumb moving slowly across the screen. A man called her name. I hadn't seen him come in. Mid-40s, sharp suit, wedding ring catching the light. He pressed a hand against her shoulder casually, familiarly. She looked up, startled but not surprised. "My husband," she said when she finally caught my eye again. The words were mouthed, not spoken. Something cracked open in me, not jealousy exactly, not shock. More like confirmation of a truth I had tried to forget. She left with him, their steps in sync. I stayed behind, hands wrapped too tightly around a paper cup. Later that night, lying in bed with the glow of my phone on my face, I saw her name flash on the screen. A message. Short. Simple. "We shouldn't talk for a while." I typed back immediately, "Why?" "What changed?" but didn't send it. My thumb hovered over the blue arrow, the pulse in my chest uneven. Then I locked the screen. For days after, I went through the motions. Work, eat, sleep, repeat. My boss returned, oblivious to the quiet storm he'd left behind. Every time I saw him, the weight pressed harder. But what stayed with me wasn't anger, or even loss. It was the unfinished quality of it all. The way she'd left the air thick with things unsaid. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. The chair across from mine in the coffee shop stayed empty. Her silence stretched longer than the rainstorm had. And my unsent message stayed in drafts, glowing faintly every time I opened my phone. The climax, emotional resolution. It happened on a Tuesday. Nothing special about the day, just one of those evenings when the sky turned the color of bruised fruit and the air smelled faintly of rain that never came. I was carrying groceries up the steps to my apartment when I saw her standing by my door. No warning. No text. Just there. For a second, I thought I was imagining it. She was leaning against the railing, arms crossed, hair pulled back in a way that made her look tired, not composed. "Hi," she said. I balanced the paper bags in my arms, unsure if I should smile or keep my face blank. "Hi. Do you want help with those?" she asked, already reaching for one. I let her take it. We stepped inside, the quiet of my apartment swallowing us whole. She set the bag on the counter, then stayed there, hands resting flat against the wood. Like she didn't know what to do with them. I busied myself with putting things away, dragging out the silence. Finally, I said, "Didn't expect to see you." "I know." Her voice was soft, steady. "I shouldn't be here." I shut the cabinet, turned to face her. "Then why are you?" Her eyes flicked up at me, and for the first time in weeks, I saw the weight she'd been carrying. "Because avoiding you didn't work. Because I kept thinking about everything. And I hate how unfinished it feels." The room felt too small for both of us. "You're married," I said, not as an accusation, just fact. "I know." She pressed her palms harder against the counter, as if grounding herself. "And I'm not here to pretend I'm not. But I can't keep walking away without saying." She stopped, swallowed, tried again. "You make me feel like I haven't disappeared." My chest tightened. I wanted to reach for her, to close the space, but the words kept me in place. "And what am I supposed to do with that?" Her mouth opened, closed. "Nothing. Maybe nothing. Maybe just hear it." The quiet pressed in again. The hum of the fridge, the faint tick of the clock. I stepped closer, just enough that the distance wasn't unbearable. "I thought I was just imagining it," I admitted. "That I was the only one who," I broke off, shook my head. "Doesn't matter." "It matters," she said, quickly this time. "It matters because it's real. Even if it can't go anywhere." Her hand lifted, then hovered midair, uncertain. I met her halfway, just letting my fingers brush hers. Barely contact, but enough. We stood like that, no kiss, no embrace, just the quiet acknowledgement of what we couldn't name. She let out a breath she'd been holding. "Okay," she whispered. And somehow, that was enough. The conclusion, slow emotional closure time, didn't end that night in my kitchen. It stretched forward, days folding into weeks, the weight between us slowly reshaping itself. She didn't vanish again, and I didn't try to chase. Instead, we found a rhythm, quiet, steady, ordinary in the best possible way. Sometimes it was the bench near the office, where she'd sit with her thermos and I'd bring my coffee. Sometimes it was a walk after dark, no words needed, just the sound of our steps finding sync. There was no declaration, no sudden leap. Just small, human things, her sending me a photo of a garden fence she'd been fixing, me replying with a picture of my messy desk. The kind of sharing that doesn't demand but simply offers. She started coming by in the mornings. Not every day, but often enough that I knew what it meant. At 8:47 a.m., without fail, she'd appear in the coffee shop line, already knowing my order. Black, no cream, she'd remind the barista, with the faintest smile tugging at her mouth. And when the barista looked confused, she'd add, "He likes the bitterness." I'd answer with a quiet, "Maybe," though we both knew it was less about the coffee and more about the ritual of being seen. At my place, she filled the silences differently now. She'd wander into the kitchen, make tea without asking, leave her book half-finished on the counter. None of it felt stolen anymore. It felt lived in, like the pause in my life had finally found its missing sentence. Her husband was still a fact of her world, but the space between them widened in ways she didn't always put into words. I didn't push. I just stayed present, steady. If she wanted to talk, I listened. If she didn't, I understood. The guilt never fully disappeared, neither of us pretended otherwise, but it softened, folded into something quieter. Not absence, but weight carried together. One night, after another long day, we sat on my couch in near darkness. She leaned back, sipping tea from the same thermos she'd brought to the office months ago. I cradled my coffee, still black, still bitter. For a while, we didn't speak. Then she glanced at me, eyes soft in the half-light. "Do you remember the first time I said your name?" I smiled without meaning to. "Coffee shop. You knew my order." She nodded, setting her cup down. "I almost didn't say it. I thought, if I pretended not to notice you, it would be easier." "And was it?" I asked. Her laugh was low, tired, warm. No, we sat there, nothing more said. Just the warmth of her shoulder brushing mine, the quiet reminder that life had kept going, and somehow, it had led us here. Looking at her, I thought, maybe love doesn't arrive loud. Maybe it just shows up, remembers your order, and stays. And that was enough. 3.